Please welcome Community Development Consultant with Georgia EMC and Spring 2016 Young Game Changer, Carrie Barnes.
Well, good afternoon, friends. I am Carrie Barnes. I work for Georgia EMC, and I am also a graduate of the Young Game Changers program. And also, fun fact, I am a Mercer graduate, so I was extra just inspired and excited to hear Dr. Godsey's message. And I will tell you that I think that Mercer does a great job of implementing that curriculum as well, and it makes me think of the Gandhi quote, be the change you wish to see in the world. And I will really tell you that I think that Young Game Changers and the panel that we have represented here today really exhibits that. So I'm really excited to hear a little bit about the Young Game Changers program, about the different experiences that each one of our panelists had in these programs. So first things first, I'm not hiding behind the podium because you can't see me, right? I'm a little shrimp back there. All you could see was my eyes. So I'm going to be kind of traveling around. But I do want to tell you a little bit about each one of our panelists. So first up, Benjamin Andrews is an independent marketing and communications professional living in the Metro Atlanta area. His experience includes work on campaigns as well as in the public and nonprofit sectors. Originally from Americus, Georgia, Ben worked for 6 years for his hometown's Community and Economic Development Department, rising to the level of department director before relocating to Chamblee, Georgia. Ben is currently a member of the board of directors of Georgia Forward, and was a team leader in the inaugural Young Game Changer class in 2012 in Americus. Ben has a degree in management from Georgia Tech and an MBA from Georgia Southwestern State University. He currently lives in Chamblee with his wife Casey and their 2 dogs. Next up is Rebecca McWilliams. Rebecca is a native of Las Vegas, Nevada, and she followed her love of architecture, history, and landscape variety to Georgia in 2005. A graduate of the University of California, San Marcos, McWilliam serves as the Director of Tourism with Visit Dublin, Georgia, where she shares her passion for tourism as an engine for economic and community development, all while sampling the best Georgia food, obviously, in downtown Dublin, exploring back roads, and collecting bits of Georgia history. Rebecca was a member of the 2014 Young Game Changers program working in Dublin. Next, we have Kenita Williams. And Kenita joined the Southern Education Foundation team in January 2017 as the director of SEF's new initiative, the Racial Equity Leadership Network, an intense cohort-style fellowship for C-level leaders from school districts in the South committed to equity-centered systems change as a solution to addressing racial and economic disparities. Prior to joining SEF, Kenita was the partnerships manager for Atlanta Public Schools, where she worked to secure resources and community partners to support APS's goal of ensuring a better future for all students. Other career highlights include being a public policy fellow for 2 years with the Council of Michigan Foundations, and a year working on Capitol Hill for the then Senator Barack Obama. Kenita lives in Tyrone, Georgia with her husband Adam and daughter Kennedy. She was a member of the Spring 2016 Young Game Changers class working in Douglasville, Georgia. Cool. We also have Scott Pogue, and in March 2017, Scott joined Williams & Associates as the Director of Business Development. Williams & Associates is a civil engineering, surveying, and landscape architecture firm that has worked in over 40 states and currently represents over 35 communities in the state of Georgia and their economic and industrial development efforts. During the past 7 years, Scott has been a local economic developer in both Georgia and North Carolina. He has announced over $800 million worth of new capital investment and over 6,500 net new jobs in the communities he has served. And he has successfully worked with a range of companies from startups to Fortune 500 companies. His leadership has also successfully supported various workforce development, entrepreneurial, and legislative initiatives. Scott was a member of the Fall 2016 Young Game Changers working in Augusta, Georgia. Last but not least, we have Ms. Shemeeka Johnson. She is a senior communications specialist at the Georgia Department of Economic Development. In this role, she manages the external communication and public relations efforts for the Workforce Division, handles media relations, manages social media outlets, and prepares speeches for agency leadership, among other duties. Prior to joining the Department of Economic Development, Shemeeka served as the media coordinator for the city of Valdosta. where she worked in television production and reporting. Shemeeka is a graduate of Valdosta State University and a member of the Public Relations Society of America, Georgia chapter, and is currently pursuing a Master's of Business Administration at the University of Georgia's Terry College of Business. Shemeeka and her son David reside in Cobb County. She was a member of the Spring 2017 Young Game Changers class working in LaGrange. So let's give them a hand. We're really excited for our panel. So first, I want to ask each of the panelists to tell us a little bit about their own experience. Just, what experience did you have in your own program of Young Game Changers? And I'm going to start with you, Ben.
So I was in the first class in Americus, Georgia, which is my hometown, and where I was working in economic development at the time. We didn't really know what to expect since it was the first class. We didn't have like a blueprint of what other communities had done. So it was a new thing. It was really exciting. There were about 32 or 33 of us, and there were 4 other people from Americus in the class. The ideas that Americus asked were really broad compared to some of the other communities, but we got some really good ideas out of it. It was a lot of fun, and it was one of the first times where I got to really work with people across the state on it. My group was fantastic. We had a lot of people from public and private sector. We had at least one recovering attorney who was in the room earlier, but he's not now. But I've kept in touch with several of them. A few of my team members are here. And I just really enjoyed it, and I got to, being from the host community, see a lot of the ideas get implemented.
Wonderful. Rebecca, you're up.
It was kind of amazing. I came to work in Dublin. I'd been there for 2 months at a brand new Convention and Visitors Bureau, and I was approached by Jeff Davis, who was with Ben in the Americas class, and he was like, "Hey, we want you to apply for this." And I was like, "Oh, yay, fun, sure." And so we went through the application process, and Chris came down, sat with us. We kind of winnowed down these questions that we wanted to focus on, and then 2 months later, bam, we went to work. I had, no offense, the best group of people from all across the state come to Dublin, and we learned from each other, we invigorated each other, we listened to each other. Their ideas were huge and they were massive, and we really got close. I'm currently in contact with probably half of them still. I call them when I need advice on the projects that we're implementing. When I came into the organization, I was given a resource team report from the Department of Economic Development's Tourism Division. And then, 8 months later, I had this Young Game Changers plan, and as I'm going through both of them, I'm like, this is my program of work. This is totally my action plan for the next few years. And that's what it's really become. We're in 2018, we're going to start the Bike Trail and Riverwalk project. We're wrapping up our Martin Luther King Jr. monument. It's now a park. It's not just a memorial. Thanks to the Young Game Changers, we've completely revitalized the face of downtown. Whole new gateway wall, whole new young group of people in our community that are, they have a voice. They know they can call us, and they can approach the mayor, they can approach the Downtown Development Authority, and that's really been, I think, the best lasting impact.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rebecca.
We had a pretty good group too. So again, I'm Kenita. I was with the Spring 2016 cohort in Douglasville, Douglas County. So I won't go a whole lot into it because we heard a lot from Dr. Jones earlier about the impact of our class. We were asked, obviously, the 4 big ideas, but they range from how do we help position downtown for success given the relocation of the highway? How do we make arts and cultural experiences more relevant to millennials? And then I was on the education, naturally, because I'm in education, group that we called Opportunity Tomorrow, to really think about how we could leverage the outside community to help prepare students in partnership with the school district for careers of tomorrow. And so we did a lot, had some good ideas, some obviously lasting, like the arts and cultural work. And so I'll actually talk a little bit just about my experience, and just it was just a phenomenal opportunity, and I feel really fortunate to have been able to be part of it. I think I do leadership development now. I've done it before. Leadership, it's I think I have a pretty well-developed sense of what it means to have a relevant and meaningful experiences for the participants, and I think this was a brand new kind of this leadership in action paradigm, which I think is really kind of a paragon for some of the leadership development experiences that I've had. I think it married a lot of the best elements. You have your personal leadership development, you have outward in a community, and then you have like actual practical application. So it was just great enough that I had friends in the 2 next cohorts, like I'm like, you need to apply for this, and also great enough that I'm actually adopting and adapting things as I build out my own current leadership development program.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kenita. Scott?
It was a great experience. You know, I wasn't familiar with the program when I applied to be in it. A friend of mine and colleague, Megan Duke, was on the board, and she, you know, kind of got me into it. But it was one of those things where, you know, at the time I was working in local economic development in Augusta, and so as a local economic developer, you're always kind of nervous when something like this comes to town, because you're like, you know, all right, you know, am I going to kind of be, you know, kind of put on the, you know, in the spotlight, you know, for good or bad. And it was really cool just because, you know, we already had a lot of big projects that were kind of in the works behind the scenes, and so I really got a lot of good feedback, and ideas that came out of the program kind of validated some of those things that we were already kind of working on and identified, but then also had a lot of really cool new ideas that had come out of it, and the community really embraced it. The Convention and Visitors Bureau is actually now in the process of an $80 million fundraiser, and they've actually taken a lot of the ideas that came out of the Young Game Changer process and partnered it with some of the master plan stuff that they've looked at doing and looking at implementing a lot of the Young Game Changer things. We were actually really fortunate. We actually had an elected official in our class, and so throughout the whole process, he's like, I know my work's going to start, you know, when you guys leave town. And so Commissioner Sean Franham, who was in our class, he's actually spearheaded a lot of efforts from an elected official standpoint that it might have been a little bit harder to get spotlight on those, you know, after the program was over with. And so I would encourage future classes, you know, if you have elected officials, you know, get them involved in the program because then that kind of gives them ownership of it as well.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Shemeeka?
So, Carrie, I was in the LaGrange Troop class, and what I can honestly say is I remember day one was my big impression on the program. We went around the room and we began to introduce ourselves and tell what we do and what our skills are. And I remember sitting in that room thinking, I don't really know what we're going to be doing here, but whatever it is, it's going to be really good, because these are some smart people in this room. LaGrange Troop County really challenged us, but in the best way, because that's one of those communities that if you're there for business, you better go ahead and do that business and get out, because you will start thinking, where can I stay here? And do they have any apartments? Because there's just so many cool little nuggets all throughout that county that will literally suck you in and keep you there. This program was a really good experience for me because, like we've all heard up here, word of mouth is golden for these type of programs. My friend Amanda Peacock was a game changer. A good friend of mine, Odie Donald, which you heard from yesterday, he was also a game changer. So it seemed like everyone in my circle was nudging me and encouraging me to participate in this, and I'm so glad that I did. It was an excellent experience.
Wonderful. So we did hear this morning from the kind of the city perspective, and I do want to give you a little bit of background. So the Young Game Changer program, as we've kind of got an idea, is a community applies, and then we recruit through word of mouth and through just many different vehicles. Just the best and the brightest, you know, some really wonderful young professionals from across the state who are in many different disciplines. And I really think that's one of the values of this. It's just like you're saying, that we all come from these kind of different walks of life and in these different worlds, and we come together to address the problems that the community is facing. And the community is very involved in identifying what the challenge questions are, what are our issues, and in what areas do we really need some help and we need some fresh ideas. So you know, we've said a lot that this is a leadership and action program, and I really think, I work with a lot of leadership programs, and just like Kenita was saying, I think this is what really makes Young Game Changers stand out, is that this is not just about this is how you be a good leader. It is actually you are down there in the thick of things, learning how to be a great leader. So that's what I would like to hear from you guys next. Like I said, this is a leadership in action, and I do think that experiences teaches better than words ever could. So tell me a little bit about how you feel like this program helped you to grow as a leader, as a person, in a personal way as a leader. And jump in.
I'll jump in. So in my day job, I work in PR, and all of my mentors along the way, they say, you just don't have the personality for what you like to do, because I'm a natural introvert. If you notice, I sat in the farthest corner of the room that I could find. I usually try to go toward the door. It's hard for me to intermingle, but this program was challenging in the best way, because it requires that you kind of intersect ideas, experiences, and skills with others that are completely different from you. In my group, we were called the Millennial Minds, and we were challenged with figuring out how to take all those type A personalities and figure out how to balance that energy so that we could concentrate on the task at hand and really provide some meaningful suggestions to the community. So I think teamwork is the thing that I learned most from this program.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Anybody else?
I'll jump in. So I mean, we just got so much from the program. It's really hard, like, oh, we did this. So I tried to, while you're talking, really kind of boil down to, I think, 3 kind of takeaways, like leadership. I think, one, I'm a lot more practical leader just because of the practicality of the program. I'm like, it's great to have all these big ideas, but can they be operationalized? So now I'm really having both of those lenses as I'm thinking through different opportunities. I'm also a more informed leader. I think just the breadth and depth of people that we come across both in our cohorts, who are phenomenal people, and then the leaders that we have access to. You just are smarter naturally, and then we learn more about the issues of Georgia, so you're just more informed. And I think I'm a more connected leader. I'm a transplant from California. A lot of people are not originally from here, but I very intentionally decided to come here to build my life and career. And so I'm like, I need to know what's going on in the state, and now through this, which is also another value add of this program. A lot of programs that I've done have been very sector specific or very region specific, and then with this you get a multi-sector, multi-state perspective. And so like now I can call people from places I still can't really pronounce, but I have that network now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that.
For me, I think it was more how to be that champion. No one in Dublin at the time really knew who I was. So how, I kind of really learned how to approach people. And, one of our projects was a very huge gateway project, and we have a very active Keep Dublin Lawrence Beautiful program. So, learning how to kind of work among those community organizations and learning how to be, the face and tie all those loose ends together and be the connector, and this person can handle this and this person can handle this, and all of these ideas have merit and they all have value, and keeping tabs on what everyone is doing. So it really taught me community-wise, how do you be that champion day to day? How do you prioritize? How do you get things done? And how do you keep the flow going amongst all these different organizations that all have a very valid purpose and point for being a part of an individual project?
Absolutely. Pacing ourselves, right?
Yeah.
I think, there are a lot of leadership programs, out there, and, there's some that are just fluff ones that, you pay a fee and get put on your resume, and that is not this program. You earned it. I was actually at the kickoff for the current class, and someone were kind of asking me, well, what can we expect and all that? I'm like, man, it is tough. Yeah. You are essentially have a second job, and this community has hired you guys to come in as a consulting firm to help them solve these problems. And at the end of it, they get this almost 100-page consulting document with budgets and timelines and research and what has been done. And so, it just from a logistics standpoint, learning how to communicate and delegate and trust your team, because so much of the work and research that is done is done remotely. And so, I mean, you have to use technology to be able to interface with each other and schedules and having to juggle families and jobs and all these kind of things to be able to come up with this quality product that you can be proud of at the end. And I mean, even in Augusta, I mean, to this day, the media still quotes things out of our document that was put together, like, oh, this was an idea that came out of the Young Game Changer program last year. And so, I mean, that's really cool to be able to have your name on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. Ben?
So for me, as a team leader, the first thing, one of the mistakes I made was after our first conference call with Amir and the other team leaders, I told my team, guys, we are so far ahead of the other two teams. And then we kind of slowed down a little bit because we're like, oh, we went into cruise mode for a little while. Then the second conference call came and I was like, the guys, they caught up to us. Then we like kicked it back into gear. But for me, right after the Young Game Changer program is when I got promoted to being the department director. And in a city like Americus, a lot of people are like, okay, there's this 25-year-old kid who like was in Cub Scouts with my little kid, and now I'm a council member and he's a department head. I don't know about this. So getting that collaborative experience and getting used to working with people from different backgrounds on this program right before having to go into that position where I'm working with other department heads on a collaborative thing and working with, you know, the county and our Chamber of Commerce and all those other entities gave me just a lot of valuable experience that made it so that I could really quickly prove that, you know, I needed to be there and deserved to be at the table. And this program really helped me with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Wonderful. So one of the other great benefits, I think, of Young Game Changers is that I know from my experience, I do community development, so I do lots of community planning, but even going through this experience allowed me to see my own community that I live in kind of with new eyes, and it gave me just a fresh perspective on how I can be involved and how I can help implement change in my own community, not just the community I was working in. So I was wondering if any of the rest of you had that same kind of experience. And some of you were local, you're not anymore, but did that experience in Young Game Changers allow you to take those lessons and implement them elsewhere as well?
I think that, I mean, I was new to Georgia. I mean, I'm still kind of new to Georgia. I've only been in Georgia for 4 years, and so at the time I think I had only been in Georgia for 2 or 3 years, and so I felt like I had a pretty fresh perspective on looking at Augusta, and especially from an economic development standpoint, you really kind of get thrown in and entrenched in all the things that are going on. And so I still kind of had that outsider's perspective of, man, we got a lot of stuff going on here. Like, it's cool. And then, but I think if you've grown up in a community or been there for so long, it's really easy to kind of get Eeyore about stuff like, oh, our downtown's so horrible, or, you know, oh, there's nothing to do here. I have to go to Atlanta, or I have to go to Charleston to do stuff. And I just didn't see that. And then, you know, you start kind of thinking you're crazy. And then, you know, you have all these great leaders. You know, I had some colleagues, you know, that were also in economic development that were in my class, and, you know, people that had done really cool things in their careers in such a short amount of time. And they come in like, man, I've never hung out in Augusta, but this place is awesome. Mm-hmm. And so you really kind of get that validation and, you know, that you're not crazy. And that, all right, so now that we know that, and that was actually one of our recommendations was all in Augusta. And that you already have all these great things in Augusta. You don't have to create this whole new thing to do, but how do we repackage what you have and then market it both internally and externally? And so that was kind of one of our big ideas from our millennial standpoint.
Wonderful. Thank you. Anybody else?
From being in the community, I think this really gives you that fresh set of eyes and a fresh perspective compared to other leadership things that are done. And not knocking any of them because they're great, but like if you're in a role like something like some of us are, where you're community and economic development from your hometown. And I remember one time saying like, hey guys, should I do Leadership Sumter? And they're like, do you want to teach Leadership Sumter? And I was like, I guess not. But with this, you know, I really got to see a different perspective, see what other people thought about the community, learn some new things, and bring that to some of our leadership programs that we had internally.
Absolutely. Anyone else? Ladies? Crickets, really?
Well, because I'd been familiar with Dublin before I actually started working in Dublin, but for me it was kind of from the other angle because I was so new, you know, at the CVB. It was kind of like they were validating what I was saying, that Dublin was special, that there was things to do, that it had this huge wealth that it could build upon to market and really become a tourist destination. And then I had this report that said, do this, and it was very tourism related. It was a bike trail and river walk. It was downtown development. It was a hotel and conference center. It was gateway improvements. And, you know, it was all extremely workable. And it was like, wow, they said I should do this. So don't you think we should do this? And you know, leadership in Dublin is just so amazing. They were like, yeah, do it. Go do it.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Awesome,
so
awesome.
it was cool.
Yeah.
And I'll also add, since I've recently moved to a new community, the people in that community, when I've talked to them about this program, they've very much been like, well, we want you to be involved here and really get involved in this community and tell us like what you've learned through those programs. So I've gotten a lot of experience there real quickly because they value that I was involved in a program like this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wonderful. Well, there might be some potential young game changers in this room. So if you had some advice to give either current young game changers or future young game changers, what advice would you share with them?
Trust the process. That when I was at a conference last week and someone in the current class came up to me and they said, yeah, we just got our initial feedback from Chris. And I was like,
Think bigger.
I was like, just trust the process, it's okay. And I was like, don't get discouraged. She's going to tell you to think bigger. I actually told Chris, I was like, we need to come up with Georgia Forward t-shirts that on the back just says, think bigger on the back, and have a little quote from Chris down there. Because that was really one, I feel like I'm a pretty level-headed guy and whatnot, but Chris would come back and she pushes you. It is, like I said before, it is a hard process, and both Carrie and Chris really push you to push yourself and push the boundaries of challenging yourself of, all right, we thought we had big ideas, but apparently they can be bigger. And so by the end of it, you're like, man, why did it take us so long to get here? Because it was almost sitting right there in front of us. And so that would be my advice, is just trust the process and just don't be so rigid against it, but just kind of be flexible and kind of go with it and just trust it.
Absolutely.
I'll jump in. Well, first, definitely apply. That's the first thing. But then I'll offer two quick things. Once you're in, be present. There are demands. We have emails. We have families. We have projects at work. But try as much as possible to just be there and bond with your class and be immersed in the community, because I think you'll get more, the more you put into it, the more you'll get out of it. And then secondly, I would just say go in with a sense of humility and grace. I think we heard a little bit earlier about going into these communities and learning what assets are there. But and Chris was really good about reminding us, we're guests here. We have a good amount of the cohort that live here, but the rest of you are foreigners, essentially. So, you're not here to fix it and know it all. They are giving time, talent, and treasure, some places, to host us, to let us learn. So be there to listen, to learn, to understand, and to work in concert, and not thinking you're coming to fix and make better and tell people what's wrong with the community. I think that's really important.
Yes.
I think we need to do that a lot more.
Absolutely. Grace and humility. I love that.
I think if I could give any advice to a future game changer, well, I'll start by saying I think one of the good things about this program is the diversity aspect. I think that Georgia Forward strategically picks participants of this program not based on one model of what a game changer is, but just a bunch of different characteristics and skills that as a melting pot makes for a really good group. So if you are selected as a young game changer, just be confident in the skills that you bring to the table and know that there was a strategy behind your presence in the program. I was not picked as a game changer because I'm great with numbers, because I do words and not numbers. So just know your role in the group and be confident in that, and know that you're there because you bring a unique set of skills that are needed to make this program successful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The power of one, right? You bring your unique skill set.
And I would say don't be afraid to ask the question that pops into your head. Today, someone approached me and they were like, well, this is our question, but this popped into my head, and how do I really say that publicly? And I remember, our very first session with our Young Game Changers class, one of those questions came up, and we had city leadership in the room, and they were so glad that the question finally got asked. And you dial down those questions. That's really what Chris is looking for when she sits with the community and you develop the questions. We want the tough questions answered because you are bringing fresh eyes. You are bringing your experience, which is entirely different than our experience in the city's leadership. So if there's a question, of course be tactful, but ask the question. That's why you're there. That's how those really big ideas pop up.
Yes, absolutely. It's that courage too. Thank you, Ben.
And have fun with it. I mean, it's hard work, but it's not like grueling work. You're going to be doing a lot of work, but if the community comes back and they're like giving you pushback on something, it's not that they don't like you or don't like your idea. It's they're just, we want the best thing. We're trusting in you. We expect this. And in the end, we've got great people in the room. You're going to deliver, and it's a lot of fun, and you're going to meet a lot of fun people. But don't go into it expecting that, hey, this is just going to be a cakewalk and we're going to network and not do anything, because that's not what it is.
You get to network too, but
You
there's
do get to
also some
network.
work, right? Yeah, wonderful. Have fun. I think that's always an important piece of that. So one of my last questions is this. So what advice would you give to a community that is considering Young Game Changers? Because, as we're hearing, it's a lot of work for the participants, but it's not a cakewalk for the communities either. So do any of you have advice or some thoughts for communities that are considering Young Game Changers as a possibility for the future?
I'd say trust the process again. It's one of those things where there's a reason why every community that has done this implements at least a portion of it. It's because it works. And so, I would go into it, kind of like a participant would go into it open-minded, and, you might hear some things that might be hard to hear, but, sometimes it's good having that fresh perspective come in, and because if you don't know there's a problem, then you can't fix it.
Yes.
And so I think that would be my advice, is kind of go in open-minded and trust that process, that at the end of it, as a community, you're going to have something that is valuable and brings value to the community.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I think if I could give advice to any community, I would say just understand the value of a fresh perspective. Sometimes it's hard to see the overarching issue when you're in the weeds. So just fresh eyes to the community. We don't dwell there, we don't work there, we don't live there, so we're able to see things more clearly. One thing that comes to my mind is during our final recommendations, one of our recommendations was to add kind of like an adult summer camp retreat center to Hogansville, Georgia. And you know how you have that moment when you're like, yeah, we nailed it. And that moment occurred when we were presenting that idea. And then right after we got done, the mayor of Hogansville stood up and he was like, where do I sign the check? And we were like, yes, great, they're open to it. So be open-minded to the ideas, but just understand that there's so much value in bringing in people from outside of the community that can provide a fresh perspective on the challenges that you face.
So I would say two things. One, I don't know fully the process of what happens before a community signs on, but I do think you need to be strategic about buy-in of the people with positional power to move on these issues that we're working on. If you want us to work on a school issue, have the superintendent involved, so people that are in positions to actually make things happen if we do bring great recommendations. And then two, I would say, and I mentioned it earlier, the intentionality about having a portion of the cohort be local leaders, and that's wonderful. And I think the community can be very thoughtful in that and encourage leaders to apply and say, you're going to be here to kind of carry the torch when these other people leave. We know you are making moves and you're an emerging leader. You should probably think about applying to this. So I think there could be some recruiting on the actual community's part as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Having the right people at the table. Wonderful.
Do you want to say anything? Okay. So I would definitely say, knowing a little bit more about how the communities are selected, we've been very fortunate to have communities that have bought into the program, and that's a key thing. So if your community is not all on the same page, if you have a player in the room that's a big player like a chamber or a school board or a city council that's not on the same page as everybody, maybe this isn't the right time to do a program like this. If you're a open-minded community who wants new things and wants new ideas, this is a fantastic program. And also know that we're not going to hand you a win, we're going to hand you how to get your win. We're going to show you how to do it, how to get something great, and just understanding that that's what this program is. And definitely having the local people and having that buy-in is huge. And for a lot of communities that are like, hey, we come to me all the time and be like, we want to do this one day, we're not sure, we want to learn more about it. Tell some of your young people in your community to apply for the current class and get them to come back and tell you what they thought about it and see if it's for you.
Yeah, awesome. Love it.
Yeah.
Kind of from I saw it from both angles, both from the community application process to being a participant. And I would just say, make sure that your leadership is not 100% on board, but they're 100% supportive. We, after the presentation, we were handed this report, and I was very lucky because I don't know that this happens in 100% of communities, but now the executive director of our DDA was in my Young Game Changers class. And so leadership was on board. Leadership was there to empower us, and Phil Best was just like, okay, what do you want to do? What's the timeline? Making sure that they're all present, even if they aren't fully informed as to what Young Game Changers are, is important. Make sure they're there for the presentation. Make sure you're doing your press releases. You're letting them know on Facebook what's going on, and just share it. Share the progress of these big ideas. We always include Chris on our press releases because whether it's a tourism project or it's a Young Game Changers idea, seeing those connections and making those connections for your leadership is important because it shows them a return on investment.
Absolutely. Wonderful. So the last thing I'm going to ask you is just, as we walk away, what has been your greatest takeaway from this program? I'm going to start with you, Ben.
Starting with me. My greatest takeaway, aside from the experience of doing it, I've really enjoyed getting to see it grow over time and see the network and see how it's progressed, and knowing that this program is just going to continue to keep getting better and better and helping more and more communities. And with one exception, I've been able to see the final recommendation presentations of every group, and it's just really been exciting to see how it's growing and know that direction it's going in, and being able to tell people like, hey, this thing's only getting better and you need to be part of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
For me, this program taught me to see connections, not only between people, but between organizations and leaders in our community. It definitely taught me how to combine things, how to use what the Department of Economic Development is doing with what the Young Game Changers suggested, and what our community can do, how to empower our community to fundraise and to crowdsource and to help spread the word, and all the different ways that a community and a city government and a county government and a state government can work together to really revitalize a community.
I would say probably, I spoke a little earlier about kind of the purpose of this work, and I think it has helped me reframe how I approach some of my work, especially being in the philanthropic sector and going into communities, and the purpose being empowerment, and that you are there to help empower stakeholders and not, tell them what to do, and that could be through a lot of things. It could be resources, or it could be what we're doing with information and knowledge and a different perspective, but really the purpose of my why.
Yeah, wonderful. Scott?
I think just the fact that there are other people in your community that have big ideas too, and so how do you build that team to make that big idea a reality? And so, I know I've worked on projects before where, it takes a very long time to build that consensus and to move that project forward, and you're told you're crazy a lot. But if you do your research and you build the right team and you know it's a good idea, build that team to make it a reality.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway were the relationships that I made with my teammates. Shout out to the millennial minds. I probably would have never met those other 9 individuals had it not been for this program. And, we started as complete strangers with completely different personality types, and we ended as really close friends. And I'm just really grateful for those relationships, the networking opportunities, and just really the teamwork aspect that came out of this program.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So now I'm going to turn it to you guys. I want to hear a little bit about your thoughts and ideas and questions for this panel of young minds. Does anybody have any pressing questions for us? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Carrie.
Is there a vetting committee for the classes? There's a selection committee. So you will, the applications for the Albany class are closing really soon. So if you're interested, now is the perfect time to apply. October 6th is the final deadline. So if you're interested in applying for Young Game Changers, head to the Georgia Forward website. All of the information is there. And I would highly recommend it. You have another question?
What's the average class size?
Average class size. So 50 people, right? So we have 4 groups, 4 challenge groups, and so it's right around 50. Anybody else? And another thing that when we are selecting the classes, one of the reasons for the selection committee is because we're very conscious of having a class that is representative of all areas of Georgia. So a third of the class is from the local community, a third of the class is from Metro Atlanta, and then a third of the class is kind of representative of the rest of Georgia. So when we were talking this morning about voting and how that represents, or how our backgrounds represent our priorities, we want that to be represented in this class as well, to bring those different perspectives to the table. Anyone else? Thoughts or questions or comments?
That lunch is kicking in.
I know. Well, and I will tell you this, I think the best and most wonderful gift I can ever give a group of people is to end early. So we are ending early. So we have one more thing, right? So why don't y'all give them a hand of applause.